Hi, and here's a short tutorial on the distribution of light. And this is referring specifically to images shot with natural light. It's a common issue because when we're shooting natural light, particularly outside, we're going to find that the light, sunlight, daylight, is going to fall equally across the scene. We may have areas of shadow, brightness, as in this image, which was shot on a December afternoon in England. So the sun is fairly low in the sky. We've got these quite sort of pronounced shadows on the grass. We've got this fairly bright area of reflected light on the tree, and the model is actually somewhat in shadow. So, uh, you know, we might think, well, we can't do much with this because uh, the distribution of light doesn't favour the model. You might also think, and some people would approach this issue by saying, well, we need to add some artificial light. We need to point a flash with a softbox on it at the model and boost the luminosity on the model that way. However, if we know enough about Photoshop, we don't really have to bother with all of that because we have complete control over the distribution of light in our image. I'm just going to show you an edit on this I did previously. And I think this is a reasonable solution, although looking at this again, I feel that the reflected light on the tree is perhaps still a little bit too bright in this one. This also raises the question of cropping. And one of the things that we perhaps can save us a bit of time and avoid a bit of trouble is if we just give a little bit of thought to the eventual crop of the image before we start processing. Because I could, for example, work on this area of sky, which is rather bright behind her. But there's not a huge amount of point in doing that if I'm just going to crop it out at the end. So let's try a provisional crop similar to what we had in the previous one. And so we've pulled it down pretty much to the top of the hedge. And we've pulled it in considerably on the side there, on the left-hand side. And perhaps you might think that we want to pull up the foreground a little bit as well. So what I'm trying to illustrate really is that just by cropping, we've got rid of a certain amount of the problem, which was the sky behind her. And obviously, this is a totally subjective choice. You might want to do it differently. And so there are different ways of approaching this. There are various ways of doing it manually. But I will often nowadays go straight to my Nik Collection Color Effects Pro, and I understand that the Nik Collection is still available, although I think you now have to pay something for it. It used to be free from Google, but I think you have to pay. But it's well worth getting. Quite a few of the filters in Nik are not a huge amount of use to me, but there are a couple which are absolutely invaluable, and one of them is this dark and light and center. So here we can tell the filter what we consider the center of the image to be using place center. So I think we might fairly reasonably decide that we think the center is perhaps on the face of the model, or perhaps a little bit lower down. and we can adjust, having defined what the center of the image is, we can then adjust luminosity. And obviously, as with everything, we can just kind of experiment with this until we feel it's about right. We can reduce the border luminosity as well. To the point where we're comfortable with that. And we can reduce the center size, so the area that's being affected. We could go perhaps for something like that. And I think what I would say is the great thing about this filter is that it's very quick, obviously, if you're short of time. And it also is very good at providing a very smooth blend between what it considers to be the center of the image and the background. And with some of the manual methods, we may have to do quite a bit more work to sort of blend the change in. So let's run the filter now. And that's the result of our filter. And of course, we will normally think about using opacity on the filter layer just to tune the effect to the point we want. We don't want to overdo things. So we might decide to pull it back a little bit. And I think the way I feel about this is that the dark and light and center filter is a very good way of just addressing the basic kind of balance between lighter and darker areas in the image, and causing your subject to very rapidly emerge as the main focus of visual interest in the image. So at this point, I'm just going to flatten that and we'll take a snapshot. There, I'll call that DLC. And if we just go back and forth, we can see that our model has now, it is starting to emerge from the background a bit better. However, in this case, I would normally now perhaps do a few passes using camera raw filter. And here I'm just going to raise the exposure a bit on the model. I'm going to raise the highlights a little bit. I'm going to add a dash more white. And I think that will probably do. Run my camera raw filter. And then just mask that off completely. And then with my white brush on my black mask, opacity set pretty high here, flow fairly gentle, and I can now just add this additional exposure value selectively just onto my model in the image. And so once again, what I'm trying to do here is cause her to make her the focus of interest and cause her to pop somewhat from the background. I might decide to push that up a little bit more, just on her face. Okay, and if I fold that in, we can just snapshot again. I'm going to call that manual 1. And I might, for example, decide that I also want to do something similar but I want to pull the background down even more, so I can reduce exposure on the background a little bit further. And I can then mask, pick up my black brush, and now I'm just restoring the exposure value on my subject. And I think that for me, that's an improvement. Don't have to be terribly accurate with this. I'm just brushing this, spot brushing this on, really. Okay, good. So I think at this point we've pretty much achieved the distribution of light we want, and I hope you can see how easy it is to do this in Photoshop. It doesn't take more than a few minutes. The other thing that I did do, just briefly, with my previous edit, was I just reduced saturation a little bit on the background. This is not strictly speaking to do with distribution of light. And then I just paint that saturation value back onto my subject. And this is just another way of accentuating our subject, making it appear more prominent in relation to the background. As I say, not strictly speaking to do with light here, but it's just another additional technique that I will often use to achieve that kind of distinction. So there we are. That's pretty much it. Distribution of light is a common problem with natural light images, but it is pretty easy to rectify it if you know how to do it. And it does mean that you'll find that once you get the hang of this, you will find that you will have good images which you might previously have rejected because of this issue. And perhaps you have a good expression on your model, you have what is otherwise a nice capture, but you feel that the distribution of light wasn't working very well. So this is how you fix it, and quite easy and quick to do. Okay, so that's it for now, and as always, yeah, that was the previous edit. This is the one we have now. Yeah, so okay, so thanks very much for watching and listening. I hope you find that useful and interesting, and I hope you'll have fun experimenting with these techniques on your own images. But for now, I'll say goodbye and see you on the next video.